Shaheen, please.
Thank you, and thank you to each of you for being here this morning. Dr. Stent, you pointed out that Russia is going to step up its information war this year. I think they've been very effective in their information war, actually much more so than we have. And I wonder if you and others on the panel have thoughts about what we should be doing to ramp up our information war to combat what Russia's doing, not just in Europe, but Africa and other places around the world.
Thank you, Senator. I mean, we definitely should be, and I think we have not done as good a job as we should. We know what the Russians are doing. It's very difficult to counter some of their disinformation, but we have a lot of smart people working on this who should understand how to do it. We have to do for different audiences. So I think we have to also explain to the Europeans, those people who oppose supporting Ukraine, what this is about. We definitely have to do more in the global south, whether that is radio, TV, using other media, really explaining to them what this conflict is about. And as I said, I think we also have to try and penetrate that iron information curtain in Russia itself. We are not getting through to the Russian people. It's very difficult to. They don't have alternative sources of information, and even when they do, they don't know what to believe. But I just think we should put more resources into that.
Thank you, I agree. Before I go on, I want to ask you about Belarus, because Lukashenko a couple of weeks ago announced that Belarus would not join Putin's war, although it continues to serve as a staging area. So can you talk about how much you think we can rely on that? Are we going to see Belarus engage further with Putin in this war? And what's the status of the citizens of the country in terms of their concern about the war?
Sure, that's a very important question. So Russia has been pressuring Belarus since the beginning to send troops there. But one thing that the dictator Lukashenko understands is that 80% of the Belarusian population do not support this war, and if he did try and mobilize and send them there, he would face significant disruptions and protests at home. Yes, it's a very repressive state, but still, people do take to the streets there. So he does understand that. And that's why he said we'll only join the war if Belarus is attacked by Ukraine. Now, of course, you could manufacture something, which they would be capable of doing, and say, well, the Ukrainians threatened us. But so far, he has held that line. And in fact, there are Belarusians who are fighting with the Ukrainians in Ukraine. If you look at the recent meeting between President Putin and President Lukashenko, and just look at President Putin's body language, these are not two leaders who are too fond of each other, and the Russians have been irritated by Lukashenko for a long time. On the other hand, he's completely dependent on them now to stay in power because of the fraudulent election. So I think I would not anticipate that Lukashenko will send troops there unless something drastically changes and he's told that he has no choice, but he will face real opposition domestically.
Thank you. Ms. Mascott, what would be the impact of China providing weapons to Russia?
I think Russia has a few immediate needs that China could fill. I'm not a China expert, and I certainly don't understand whether or not they will do this or not, but Russia has shell hunger. They need artillery rounds now. China could fill that for them temporarily until their defense industrial base clicks into a higher gear, which is in progress now. It may take them multiple months or the end of the year for their own domestic resumption. I think also Chinese ISR would help Russia try to close some of the gap with the Ukrainians, although the Ukrainians are outclassing them in this regard, either organically or through the support that we're providing them. Really, those two things are immediate. The higher-end capabilities, and this is very speculative, there are multiple shared systems between the two militaries. So it could be air defense missiles. They run on the shared systems. Russia has been repurposing those for land attack munitions. I think that's probably a very low probability, but I would be looking at artillery. I'd be looking at drones.
Well, hopefully they will decide that it's not in their interest to do that. Can I ask you about the Wagner Group and the dynamic between the Wagner Group and the Russian army, and whether there's any reason to think that's going to deteriorate, or have they reached peace and are able to work together?
I think it's deteriorating in real time this week. Those two groups have had tensions that date back to Syria, and it bubbles up and then it's resolved. The thing about President Putin is he doesn't like mess. And right now this is very messy and uncontrolled. So I think inevitably he will probably step in and resolve this. Wagner, over time, is becoming less important to the overall war effort. As Russia mobilizes and has more men, that critical role that they played last summer will decline over time. Prigozhin is misreading a lot of really important cues right now. He's being told by important and dangerous people to stop with the public criticism, and he persists. I think also they're taking a long-term approach to undercut him. He's not allowed to recruit from the prisons anymore, and they're choking back some of his artillery supplies this week near Bakhmut. So I think that this is deteriorating in real time. I don't think his future is a bright one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you very much for being here for our panel